I'll do
Okay.
it. Okay, the recording is in progress.
All right. Well, hi, everyone. So like Doug said, I'll be presenting on FMHAM, and it's a bit strange because I know that Charles presented on this just last month, but basically the presentation I want to bring forward is one where I look into a FileMaker-based implementation where we kind of put some flesh or put a face on FMHAM, FMHAM being headless by definition. So I like to play on words and say that this is FMHAM's pig, so a pretty interface for group, and that it can save your bacon. So all in all, I don't know if some missed on Charles' presentation, and it's great content. My take on this was simply the first time I got my hands on his tool and on his presentation, it felt to me like there was so much, and I had a difficult time wrapping my head around it all. So I felt like, well, if only I had this assemble kit, you know, instead of looking at Lego pieces and recognizing there's potential, you know, if I see a kit, then it's easier for me to say, oh yeah, I like this, or I'm going to take that and I'm going to swap this in and have that instead, and so on and so on. So this is my attempt on putting together a kit that people can say, oh yeah, I could use this, or this would be helpful for my solution, or things like that. So feel free to ask questions or to come forward with comments during the presentation. Just unmute yourself and fire off. And if at the end there's still some questions, we can look into that. So HAM stands for Headless Authorization Module. So it's not about authentication. It's really about what you can do in the file once you are authenticated. As we said, it is headless, and it uses JSON to store the privileges that you have during your session. So it lets you do a couple things that are hard to achieve with FileMaker security, traditionally speaking. So for instance, it lets you define different groups and have the group inherit privileges from other groups. So you have to watch out for circular references, but if you stack them, you can have something that will let you have 2, 3 levels and so on. It lets you also assign privileges to users instead of groups, and a given user can belong to multiple groups at the same time. So that can be quite handy. There's also some functions that are useful in there. So letting you get the maximum of something, or the sum of something, or even evaluating something on the fly. So we'll look into this as we go. The set of custom functions that are used by FMHAM, because that's really what FMHAM is all about. It's just some custom function and a tiny script that you put into your solution. Uses while. So if you want to, the while function, if you need to deploy that in your solution, that means you need to be using at the very least FileMaker 18 and have a JSON object for the definition of all your groups. And then each users need to belong to at least one group. You cannot have a user that does not belong to a group. So for the presentation, I don't have slides. It's all based on this demo file that we're looking at, and that demo file was built from the assets file that comes with FileMaker. Simply because it has a table that I can use for data purposes, and a table that is employees, and that was my go-to for something that would be close to user records. So we're going to quickly look at our file. So as I said, we have some data, and we have the employees. Down here, I have this Venn diagram, and it's not dynamic. It's just it's a flat picture that's always going to look like that. But basically, it's simply to say, oftentimes we think of Venn diagrams as something where everything is symmetrical. But in real life, especially when we're thinking of security, things get messy. We don't always have things that are clean cut. There's sometimes where, okay, so and so can do those many things, and we want someone else to have part of that, but not the whole thing. So here we have a Venn diagram where there's 5 groups, but in how they intersect, there's no less than 14 intersections the last time I counted. Perhaps it's off by a couple, but that's that. And if we want to implement something like this in FileMaker, basically we need 14 different privilege sets, and that can be high maintenance. So I'll discuss today in how I'm combining HAM with some other things where it lets me trim down on the overall count of privilege sets and maintenance. So so we have different users here. Julie is the admin, and so we have her group on the right, and everything that is listed underneath are the privileges that are assigned to that group, okay, regardless of if someone else was to belong to administrators, they would get those same privileges. Okay, so the demo file here does not have a UI to handle just the groups by themselves. And in the middle, we see privileges that are granted to only her as admin, or as whatever, that's the account name that we have over here. And what we see is that, well, having privileges at the account level is completely optional. And you can use it not only for things that would be conventionally used for security purposes, but you can also store some information in there that you'll want to reuse as you are anywhere in the solution. Because again, FMHAM gives you this handy calculation that you can summon from just about anywhere and say, hey, give me my user preference for text size, and then it's going to give you, in this case, 14. So so it gives you a great deal of things that you can play with and have fun. So our main group has its privilege, but it can also inherit privileges from other groups. So in this case, if I look at my group, I see that it's inheriting from both buyers and sales staff. Those are 2 other groups that are defined in this in the solution. And if I want to say, okay, I'm going to add groups to my user, then I can add other groups on top of the administrator group for this one user. So we're going to look into this a bit later. So as I said, Julie is our admin. We have next Samantha. She is part of the buyers group. The buyers have an asset price limit set to 2,500. In her case, we're going to say that she is a senior, so we've bumped up her asset price limit to 50/50, and we're free to override something at the user level. So if there's anything that is defined whatever happens at the user level, those are the overrides. They will always take precedence on anything that is defined in the at the group level. Now here we have Eric. Eric is part of the sales staff. He's able to edit the assets. There's no entry for the asset price, and we have some other preferences. And over here we have Jeffrey. Jeffrey is also part of the buyers group, but we've lowered his asset price limit to 1,000. So perhaps he's newly joined the team. And Fred over here, Fred is part of a group that is called corporate. So that group is a bit different. So when you define inheritance, you can have different kind of things where, say, you have people in accounting that will be lead that inherits everything that is granted to senior, that inherits everything that is granted to junior. But when we're talking about what we have here, we have a group that inherits from something that is defined as regions, and we can't really say that everything that applies to West should be inherited from everything that we have East, and so on and so on. So it's a bit of a special case, and we're going to look into that in part of the demo. So, and lastly, we have Romeo, and Romeo is just an account that I keep if I want to be looking at different, different groups, not to mess around with the other employees that I have in the file. So we're gonna do a couple of quick tests and look at some things together. I'm gonna go to Eric's record and log in as him, and then go to our asset. So I want to be sure that from over here, we're going to see that if I want to change my price, okay, to say, okay, it's 99.12, here I'm getting a custom dialog. So because it's a custom dialog, we understand that there's some script trigger that is involved here, but I also have another version of that same field that has no no trigger attached. And if I do this, then I'm getting a different dialog altogether. This one is a prompt that comes from the field definition at the validation level. So again, some people will argue that validation is not security per se, and that's fair enough. And I'm not trying to debate that point. To me, for what I'm trying to achieve here, it's it achieves what I wanted to achieve. So here I can say, okay, I'll want, but the data is never going to let me commit. So I'm going to revert the record and be back to my original state. So that's what we get with Eric. Now, if I go and re-log in with Jeffrey, I'm going to just going to assets. So if I try to make the same edit here, now I'm getting a prompt, but this time the message has changed. That's because in the triggered script, we have conditions that are calling on ham, and that let me make a decision based on what is happening. So we're going to look at that. And same thing if I want to do this. Well, here for validations, we don't get to customize the validation message. It's not something where the calculation engine can be called upon. So we get the exact same message. So perhaps we'd want to to make sure that the message we put in here would be valid at all times, or would give the user some understanding of why he's getting this this message. And on the other way around, if I was to say, well, Jeffrey has a limit for $1,000, so 900 should work, and 900 does work. Same thing here where no trigger is involved. If I want to make it 912, then it goes through. So it's really doing what we want it to do. Now, if I was to be logged in as admin, okay, with full access, and just wanting to have a quick look at the so manage database, we're saying yes, we are full access. So if I go back to my asset, so in here, if I say something like 19,000, then again, I'm getting this prompt because, well, it's a script trigger. The script trigger doesn't care that I'm full access. It's going to still do what it has to do. And same thing for a field validation. You know, if I go in here and I say I'm full access, I'd like this data to go through. Well, field validations is about like data integrity. You know, we want the data to stay in a specific state, and it's enforcing that state. It's not because I'm full access that I can bypass all that stuff. So I'm going to revert that. And that said, I think we do have, I forget what the limit is for Julie, but in her case, so perhaps that's too high. If I was to say 10, still too high, whatever. So there we go, back to 9,000 some. That's within her her range. So, and if I was to be logged in not as any of those people, if I was to be logged in as Fred, who doesn't have any ability to edit the asset record, okay, I can go in here, and this time if I'm just typing into the serial number field where it's just a text field, as soon as I type, what we get is a different dialog. This time it's not a custom dialog, it's not a validation dialog, it's really a dialog that is based on FileMaker security. It says, hey, you don't have the privileges that would let you do this. So let's log back in as our admin and go have a look at what's happening under the hood. So if we go look at our price field with the script trigger. So over here we have our script, and we're gonna look at the script itself. It's fairly simple. We're saying, okay, I'm checking for a privilege. So that's the custom function from ham. Okay, what I'm checking against is asset price edit. So can I asset price edit? Yes or no. If not, then we're gonna show a custom dialog. We're gonna revert message and revert the record and get out of there. So at this point, you know, it's for you to determine what you want to implement over here. I'm not saying that you should necessarily do this or revert or whatever. You can decide that something else happens. But what I want to stress is, okay, you can have something that's very easy to put in to control the flow of your script, that is easily readable, and it's kind of a set it and forget it. Okay, and same thing. If this clears, then we're now checking, okay, well, let's look at the price. Is the price greater than the asset price limit that I have for my user session? And if so, then we're going to, again, give an error message and revert out. And if not, then it goes through. So if we look at our price field, because we said there's a field validation that's involved, well, no surprise here. We're saying, okay, let's make sure that the price is under the asset price limit and that we're able to edit our asset in the first place. So pretty easy again to set up, and very similar to what we saw in the script. So there's that. And then there's what we saw for the, what we saw for the record edit. Okay, so over here, I chose to define unstored calculations. Okay, one for record edit is allowed and one for record delete is allowed. And no surprise, it's again calling on Ham's custom function to say, well, are we allowed to edit the asset and are we allowed to delete the asset? You know, and this is what we're looking at from the security module. So if we go into manage security, what we're going to see is that we have many accounts, and of course the admin account is using the full access privilege, but everyone else is tied to a privilege set that is simply called everyone. So if we go look at that privilege set, what we're going to see is that record level access has been customized, and all the customization is really just saying, okay, we're going to limit the ability of people to edit the records or delete the records. And the calculation, because I'm defining that unstored calculation field in all the tables, you know, all I put in here is record edit is allowed, you know, and then I put it in my clipboard and I go to the next table. I say, okay, when is it that I can edit vendors? Well, I can edit vendors when record edit is allowed. And I paste that in for all the tables. Same thing when I go to the deletion, you know, okay, record delete is allowed. And you can name the field however you want, you know, it's not going to change a thing, but basically once that setup is complete, you don't have to come back in here and all the countless nested dialogues that we have in the security. So you could implement it at the view level. It's just at that point, just make sure that you know what you're dealing with, because performance-wise, it can be very taxing. And same thing for edits and deletes. Just watch yourself if you are doing something that targets a set of records instead of just one record. Okay, because at that point, the server has to say, hey, is this person allowed to carry on with this replace field contents, you know, for all the table, or delete all records and all that stuff. And it has to check and resolve that calc for every single record, you know. So, but technically, even if you were to define the exact same thing in this calculation dialog and skipping that altogether, over here, there's nothing that lets you say, oh, I want my calculation to be stored or unstored or anything. It's just, it's security. So I don't have any indication that FileMaker will store what's there. For sure, if it relies on globals or anything, it won't be possible to start with. So so I don't think that there's anything here that makes this less performant than what we'd have if the calculation was handled some other way. So, and right here, I'm just going to pause to grab some water, but if people have questions about what I've talked about up to here, it would be a good breakpoint for questions. All right. So let's look at some more. I said that there are cases where we're going to want to look at the sum of things, or the maximum of something, or even evaluate an expression on the fly, and Ham lets us do that. So I'm going to go back into our employees, because there's a lot of scenarios where group inheritance will let us achieve what we need, especially say you have a vertical solution and there are I'm sorry, different kind of memberships, like maybe someone is on your bronze plan or silver plan or gold plan or whatever you want to call them. It could be light, enterprise, anything. So that usually is defined as, okay, give me everything current and under, but when we're talking about what we had for Fred, where he oversees different regions, then that is slightly different. So we're going to look at those different regions. Okay, so let's just say we have central over here. So we have those three things defined, and we're saying asset price limit is going to be 1, other stuff is going to be 1, other thing is going to be 1, and we see here that there's a suffix, okay, for max, sum, and max. So we're gonna look for the maximum of those across all of the inherited groups. So if I now go to East, okay, I have an asset price limit of 1,000, and then some other stuff that is set to 2, and some other thing that is set to 13. And if I look at West, then 1,000 is set to the other thing, and asset price limit is set to 100. So if I'm trying to stack my groups in a chain of inheritance, there's no way that I can stack West and East so that I'm getting the largest values for both asset price limit and other thing. So that's why over here we're defining them with underscore max, and that's going to make it so Ham, when it aggregates all the different groups that we are inheriting, then it's going to say, hey, wait a second, for this thing, we actually want the highest value of them all, or we want the sum of them all. So so if we say that Fred is overlooking all 2 areas, maybe there is something that is possible for the East group, and something that is also possible for the West group, and we want him to have the highest level in any of the groups under. So that's what we would be using. And for himself, I also have another calculation that is called rolling credits. Okay, and this one is having a suffix of underscore eval. And with that, I simply say, okay, well, it's going to be, let's get the day of the month, times 100. So thinking that maybe you have something in your solution that lets send, I don't know, SMS messages or whatever, for which you have credits, and unused credits add up during the month, and it's use it or lose it, and on the next month, then you flush all of that and you start fresh. So let's see if I log in as Fred, what we're going to see, and I'm going to bring the data viewer. Let's see what we have in here. So, and I'm just looking at current. So in here we have a courtesy global variable that is giving us what FMHAM sees, after we've logged in. So for the asset price limit, it's giving us 1,000. For other stuff, we had 1 plus 2 plus 3, so it adds up to 6. And for the other thing, we also have 1,000, so that's the max of all three groups together. And for the rolling credits, okay, well, we're getting the actual string of the calculation that will be evaluated when we do this. So basically, if we have something where we want to run a report on a Wednesday, but not have someone be able to run it on a Thursday or whatever calculation you can come up with, then you use this and you're good to go. So in this case, if I was to say, just to make sure I'm using the right spelling over here and asking Ham to give me what I have in here, so I can check for rolling credits and not sending any options, and it's giving me 300 because we're the third of the month. So there are, as you saw in the call over here, a second parameter that that lets you define options. So in the available options are things like if you want to send in an encryption key, so that the contents of Ham is encrypted and that you prevent someone from peeking at your whole stack of privileges and how they're named and things like that. You can do that. You can also, I think, use it for specifying defaults. And there's a third thing that I'm forgetting about right now. And yes, for things that get evaluated, you also get to specify, but not over here, but at initialization of the Ham setup, you get to specify if things are evaluated at runtime, like when you're making the function call, or if they evaluated at setup. And if we had it set to evaluate only at setup, then over here, instead of having the string, we'd see 300 because it would be evaluated once, and then you'd get that up until it gets initialized anew. So is this clear for everyone how we can combine things and have them inherit from one another? And if we say, well, I can't achieve what I want with inheritance, I want really to get the highest value across all of the stack, then we can do things like that, or even make the sum of everything through the stack. You know, if you're saying, okay, my bronze plan is going to be given this allowance for something, like I said, you know, sending SMS messages, and then the silver plan gets twice that, then the gold plan gets whatever, then you can say, okay, I'll just add everything up for everything that's under. And if ever you bonify whatever is at the bronze plan level, you don't have to revisit the other two. They get everything because it's inherited. So
thanks, Robert. You answered a lot of questions that I had. And
excellent.
Is this file going to be available at some point somewhere, or we just ask
absolutely
you for it?
At the end of the demonstration, I basically say that on my website, if you go and fill the contact form and say I'd like a copy of the file, I'll be sending you an email to so that you can play with this very file here.
Awesome, thank you.
So I'm just looking at my notes quickly to make sure I'm not forgetting too much in what I need to be talking about. So we've talked about the vertical solutions for Light, Pro, and Ultimate, or whatever other pattern you have in terms of plans, everything under plus current. We've said, okay, if we have no clear patterns in between things, that could be like regions. So so yeah, and then the rolling credits. So the important thing to remember is, if you want to use those special features of the suffixes, underscore eval, underscore sum, and underscore max, you want to, when you define your privilege, you use those. But when you call on the privilege, you're not sending it in, because the exact same privilege could also exist by itself without sum or without max or whatever, and you want it to resolve. So you just call however it's defined without the suffix. So something else that I want to talk about is users with multiple groups, and that can be awesome when inheritance alone does not get you there. So we talked about the Venn diagram with plenty of overlaps, and everyone has many different hats. So it can be a lifesaver, say when someone goes on vacation. You simply find a replacement and assign him the groups of the person who's on vacation, choosing if you want those groups to supersede that user's main group or not, for and that's for conflict resolutions. Okay, so if we look at this, I'm just going to go and relog in as admin. Okay, but basically, if we take any user, like for instance, if we go with a school scenario, okay, where we have the principal and the janitor, and they each go on vacation and a week apart from each other, and they need to fill in for the other one when the other one is not there. So let's just say Eric, he's our janitor, and he needs to fill in for the principal. So I would be coming in here, and then I would determine, okay, well, while he's going to be acting as principal, if I have anything in the principal's group that overlap with the existing privileges that are defined at the janitor level, would I want those to supersede my janitor settings, or would I want the janitor ones to be superseding? So if you say, okay, well, this will supersede, then I would come in here and I say, okay, he's my principal, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. And the other way around, if Eric is the principal and he's taking on the role of the janitor, well, I want him to have those additional things. But if there is something that he has that the janitor can also do, but he can do more of, then I would come in here and I'd say, well, I want the janitor role to be over here, because I don't want my principal to be losing some privileges as he's going to be filling in for the janitor. So, and again, that's only if there are conflicts. If all the privileges in between the two groups are exclusive, what Ham is going to do is it's simply going to take the two sets and it's going to merge them together, and you're good to go. And what we have here is something a bit special, because we have, well, it says special bundle, special bundle ABC, but it's there 3 times. So let's go have a look at what we have in that special bundle. Okay, so again, like, let's think about this. If you have a vertical solution, okay, and there is something that you are selling as part of your plans, but there's something that you are selling on the side, on top of your plans, that you say, hey, you know what, with this solution, you can also, I don't send faxes or whatever it is you want to do, and people are buying packages, so then you can say, okay, well, we're going to have this thing, it's going to give you 25 units of it, and by defining it with underscore sum, they add up. So if I go to my record with Eric, and if I log in as Eric and go have a look at my data viewer. So in here for flat, we see that for bundle thing, we get 75, because he's purchased it. He purchased that bundle 3 times. So there's really a ton of flexibility with HAM here. So if you want something to say, hey, it's just a access is granted, true or false, then you can use the 1 or the 0 by default. If the privileges are not granted, it's as if you were to give someone the exact same key with the 0. If you want to have something that is a threshold, like we said for the asset price, you can choose your threshold. So, and if you want to say, even like over here in between administrators and the buyers, so the buyers are, I can't change someone's privilege if I'm not someone's group, if I'm not admin. So if I go look at my buyers have a privilege that is meant to be not for admins, but because the admins are inheriting everything the buyers can do, if I want to prevent my admins from running that thing, then I have to zero it out at the administrator level. So really, there's a ton of flexibility in there. I'd have a hard time coming up with something that FMHAM is not able to address. And another thing about having people belong to multiple groups, I don't know if you've noticed, but in all of the users in this demo file, I've added all users to the disabled features group. Okay, so what that let me do is, well, if there is anything that I want to say is a disabled feature, I can plan for more stuff. I can plan for new stuff. Okay, and I can assign this the value 0. Now, as a developer, I can come in here and grant myself more stuff, because I need to develop on it. I need to test on it. I can even grant it to someone else. And I can even grant it in the groups that need to have more stuff when more stuff is going to become available, and then on go live, I can simply come in here and say, you know what, I'm going to remove this entry altogether, and then it's going to be live for whoever needs it to be live. So the one thing I really want to avoid is coming in here and putting a 1, because at that point, because this group supersedes everyone's other groups, by putting a 1 in here, I'm actually granting that privilege to everyone in the solution. Okay, so that's not something I'd want to do. And if we're talking about new stuff, because I'm over here, I chose to do this with the underscore eval suffix, I could even say, well, there's this one thing that I actually want to roll out to everyone, but I'll choose when I roll it out. And then you could say, okay, we're going to go live on January 1st of, well, 2100 is perhaps in a little while, but you choose a date that's closer. So I want it to be live on, Monday in 2 weeks at 9 a.m. And then you don't even have to come back in here. It's going to be there. So so there's really a ton of things that you can do. You can define a group for developers. You can, whatever you want to do, you get to do it with HAM. So that's something I liked, and there is so much in there to unpack. I think everyone who would implement that would have the, you know, pretty much all the options they need on their hand. And oftentimes people ask me, well, is this only for a large scale system? You know, and truly, no, you can roll this out in even a small solution. You'll be ready for when people are asking you, hey, you know what, Robert, so-and-so is gone on vacation and needs to replace someone else. Hey, you know what, Robert, we just hired someone and he's going to be, you know, sitting right in between the accounting group and the sales group, you know, and you're like pulling your hair out saying, well, am I going to create a whole privilege set just for one person and having to figure out which things to mix in there? So if you have everything defined in HAM, you're already halfway there. You know, you can tweak a couple things and you're good to go. So I'm just trying to think of a couple more things to say as you are defining your privileges and the keys that you're using in JSON to use. Just make sure that you are not having one key that would be a substring of another key, because at that point you're stepping over your own foot, and it's gonna not be good JSON, so it's not gonna resolve. And aside from that, I think I have a couple things to look into, and basically, what do we have under the hood? So it's just so big thanks, by the way, for everything that Charles has done to make this possible. Thanks to Steve SSH, because he published a custom function that I used to make this version of FMHAM to allow for nested JSON. And yeah, all there is a set of custom functions, you know, config, checkpriv, and utility, flatten JSON object, and this is just some things that I'm using in the UI. You know, you don't really need that to use FMHAM, and everything is about ham run setup. You know, so you're just grabbing the whole set of privileges, you know. So if I look at the data viewer in the system, you need to have, in my case, it's in globals, you know. So I'm just going to go to globals and say, okay, all authorization. So you need to have a JSON that has everything that your system needs to rely on, every single group, because if ham doesn't know of every single group, it won't be able to resolve inheritance for you. And basically, so once you give ham all of the definitions for the privileges, and you give ham the overrides that are meant to be the privileges that you grant just one user, you know, and that you say, okay, for the user, does he belong to a single group or more than one group? Then all you're doing is you're calling ham config, okay, saying, okay, I want to get this to work with, you know, what's all of my JSON that contains every single group and their privileges. Like, what's my user? What groups does he belong to? And what are the overrides? And then over here, parameters for, like I said, if you want to use encryption or things like that. So, and I'm just trying to look at my notes again to see if there's anything else I can think of. But yeah, so there's, like I said, over here, $flat is really just a courtesy variable. You really don't need it for ham to work. And if you don't want ham to rely on a global variable at all, you know, to do its thing, because in the in the data viewer, we do have things where ham config does contain some things, but you can go into the custom functions and say, well, instead of having $ham config, I'm going to choose a global field, and then if you want to secure that, then you can use FileMaker's native security to make sure that people, it's okay reading from it, but you wouldn't want someone to be able to write to it and things like that. But all in all, it's really, to me, it's a great gem. I like using it, and it's less maintenance and less nightmares and all of that. So if there's any questions, I think that's where my presentation ends. Oh, and I'm sorry. Again, if we say, so yeah, just my website. If you want the a copy of this file, just go to the contact form that's on the website, and just say, hey, Robert, I'd like a copy of your demo file, and I'll be very glad to email you a copy of what I used to do today's presentation.
Can you paste that in the chat?
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Robert. Really appreciate you taking us through all of that. Really interesting to see Charles ham in action, and it's amazing that you've got the ability to nest your controls and have a hierarchy. Really incredibly useful. And it would be really useful to go along with this, although hard to build probably. It'd be amazing if there was some kind of graphical or visual way of seeing what controls you've got in place, because that's always the toughest thing, is wanting to, you might have to have a meeting with people, and the question is, who's got access to what? And it would be so useful to be able to see it in a graphical way. Super hard to build though, probably.
I don't think it would be, actually.
Okay, Charles, that's
Hey, man, how you doing? Sorry, I'm late to the party there. Hope I didn't miss the first meetings too much.
The gauntlet has been cast.
Pardon me?
The challenge is thrown down.
Yeah, no, the reason I say it wouldn't be, because it's not as complicated as you think. Cam takes care of all the complex stuff, right? So what you basically need to do is generate an array where each record or row or element or object in your array is basically a particular user. And then there's a key in there that the user has privileges. And depending on how you pivot that array, you can go by privilege backwards, but I would pivot it in JavaScript, not in FileMaker script. You can show it either way. So you can drill in from either direction, because really at the end of the day, it's really about a set of privileges. Can I do this or can I do that? And so if you have all the users, you can see all the privileges they have. But if you want to click on a specific privilege, can change payroll salary, then you can work backwards in that same data. So I don't think it'd be as bad as what you think.
Well, it's easier to enumerate the things that you're not allowed to do normally than the things that you're allowed to do. I'm saying normally because there are some systems that are really locked down, where it would probably be the reverse might be true. But for the most part, most of the systems that most of us build, I think it's probably easier to show what people don't have access to. And even then, it's an incredible amount of, if you look at it at the field level, it can be an extraordinary amount of things to keep track of. I don't know, it seems like a potentially hard problem. Pardon?
To me, I didn't say. I don't think it's as bad as you think, though.
Oh, someone's talking off to somebody else. Anyway, okay, well, thanks a lot, Robert. Really appreciate that. Make sure Robert's put his website in the chat now, so everyone can head over there and click on the link and sign up and get access to his file. Let's switch over to Jeremy Brown now. We're very lucky to have Jeremy with us. He is certainly a luminary in the FileMaker world and is a big proponent of JavaScript in FileMaker. And he's put all kinds of materials out there, training materials, teaching materials to help the community. And we're lucky to have him here tonight, taking us through his, taking us through his JavaScript and FileMaker getting started talk, I think is what we might want to call it. Jeremy, is it okay if we record? Or would you prefer we don't? Or I think you're muted.
Go ahead, record, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna continue recording then.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeremy, and I'm going to kind of be looking at you tonight, so get used to that. Want to make sure this is clear, though. If anything gets blurry, just ping me quick and let me know, and I will adjust. But hopefully, everything will stay relatively clear. I'm Jeremy Brown. I am a business owner of Integrating Magic that was just started up in the last 5 months. And I've been learning how to run a business, even though it's just myself. Also, I've been learning how, like, I don't have to work all the dang time to, to survive. So that's great. I enjoy taking time off and relaxing. I live in Orlando and Florida. So I think that's roughly south of you somewhere. It's nice and warm here. I have 3 dogs, and we do a lot of fostering of pups. So it's good life, but it's also keeps me busy. So I don't actually have a whole lot of time to take off. Today, we are going to, and I'm going to just do a couple of things here. Make sure I got the chat open. Although we are going to talk about JavaScript today. I've really just decided to dedicate my time to that. My company is all about really focusing on just JavaScript for FileMaker and helping people learn it and understand it. Also building widgets for them and so forth, building applications for them that makes it work, and also some training. So tonight we're going to look at just take another look at the reasons why we as FileMaker developers can take some time to learn some JavaScript. I don't want to just throw that out there and be done. I want to, present sort of some cases for it. And I will also talk about what to learn and why, or how to learn. And then I'll close the time, if we have time, with a JavaScript development environment idea that I've been working on that just makes it really easy. And I'll get into that in a bit. I haven't done this for a while, so we're going to do this. I would love for you to interact with me via this service here. You can use your phone and scan that QR code, or you can go to that slido.com and then use that event code for this. What I want to do is get your questions and get your thoughts in a service here, so that I can look back at it often and see if there are any questions that pop up. So we're gonna do a quick little test on this just to see. Since we're in different places, I would love for you to answer this question after you have scanned the code or gone to that site. You're welcome to type in your answer to this little question. And I'll just wait a couple seconds here. There's a couple dozen of us, and I don't want to take too long, but it's kind of fun. And it's kind of fun to play around with. So yeah, take a minute to answer that. So I actually don't know. I think Canada has a different formatting code than me. So
Yeah, our format is the second one officially in Canada.
okay.
And the third one I don't think exists anywhere.
I
think those are
I just put combinations up there. So, all right, good. Well, this is a warm up. Looks like about half of us got into that. And please log in there because there is a section for questions. If you look at the top, you'll see a question tab, and you can go there and type in a question. And throughout this time, I will refer back to this and we'll see what we got. All right. So let's get started with why JavaScript. It's been an interesting topic for the last, now I've been playing with this since about 2016 or 17, I guess. So it's only been 5 years or so, but I've actually seen quite a range of opinions and thoughts about this, and I've actually seen the progression of people's thoughts about this. So it's a fun experiment to see what's going on, and I want to take a look at, in our case, what are our thoughts of it. So I'm going to go back to that poll. I'm going to go back to the poll, and you're going to be able to go to the next one. And I would like you to fill out this little survey. There's 4 or 5 questions in there that refer to your thoughts about JavaScript, what you've heard, what you've experienced yourself. So please take a moment to fill in that survey. I think, there we go. Okay. There you go. All right. Should be active and you should be filling it in. I'm trying to see why it is not. Sorry, I gotta start it over. All right, let's try it again. I don't know what's going on. Oh, because you got to submit it. That's right. So let's see here. So it looks like 12 people have responded. I'm not sure why my results are not showing up. Oh, it's because of that. There we go. All right. So I'll just go through these and see what people are thinking. Continue to fill in your answers. This is a good, I like to do this every once in a while and see where people are at. I don't have any scientific exploration of how thoughts have changed, and because a lot of people here I've seen in others, I probably know their thoughts already, but it's good to just get a feel. So in this case, very few of us have not touched JavaScript at all, but most of us, there's a little bit of some in there. That's great. What's your experience in using JavaScript to solve a client problem? All right. So it looks like some of us have played with JavaScript, but we've never actually implemented it. That's a good thought, an interesting idea. Let's see if this has changed. Nope, not that. Let's go to the next one. What roadblocks do you think are in people's minds? All right. Most of us use the unknown of what to learn. Okay, great. Nice. See if there are any other roadblocks. All right, good. And this last one, for any technique, you use? What do you value? Performance for the user, speed and development. Very nice. All right, good. Well, thank you for participating. Appreciate that. It's just a fun little thing to take a look at. So I want to focus on why JavaScript and just give a brief thesis about it. It's my experience when I worked at Saline Consulting and then Proofgeist / Geist Interactive that nowadays people are asking for more complex solutions to the problems in their apps. They're asking for things that handle large amounts of data. They're asking for widgets or solutions that are very quick and also and performant. And of course, people I think nowadays want a lot of fun interactivity, whether it's using their iPhones to enter information or hovering over things to see what's going on. So people are asking, in my opinion, I think people are asking for that a lot. I've seen that in my experience. And there's just a ton of use cases out there that people are asking for. And these are just some examples right here. You probably in your time have experienced this and have had to wrestle with a particular problem that's listed here, and you have done the best to solve it, whether it was with JavaScript or without. But this is certainly a reason to think about JavaScript, because JavaScript can handle all of this. JavaScript can handle it much faster with, in my opinion, and hopefully I can prove that it's much easier to develop some of this in JavaScript than it is in just basic FileMaker stuff. FileMaker Pro itself, the client, and soon to be Claris Pro, I got confirmation on, has a web viewer involved, and they have done a lot in the past couple of years to remove all of the roadblocks for making it work in FileMaker. I wasn't around when the web viewer was introduced, but as I understand, JavaScript wasn't maybe around then either, or it just wasn't workable in there. And as the versions of FileMaker progressed, they did little things here and there, but there seemed to be like a whole, like 9 through 14 or 15, something around there, even 16, 17, 18, where there wasn't a whole lot of improvements in this. But suddenly in FileMaker 19, they really upped the game and letting FileMaker work with JavaScript a lot easier. One example here is they gave us a new script step that allows us to perform JavaScript in a web viewer. So we can actually get a FileMaker script right here to call a function that's inside of the web viewer that's on the layout, whether it's a card window that pops up to do some calculation or an actual UI element kind of thing that we've built in JavaScript. This function this script step gives us so much control, because I can call this 100 times and get that JavaScript thing in the web viewer to do something different. Without this, it was really hard to work with FileMaker and getting it. We had to use FMP URLs, and it was just a roundabout method. Todd Geist built a web viewer bridge function, which was great, loved it, and as well as some other people had similar things, and that was workable. But this really opened the door. Second thing is they built a JavaScript library. Claris themselves built a JavaScript library that when we load code into the web viewer, it injects a FileMaker library into our web viewer code, into the global environment there, so that we can then, inside of a function here, like this handle click function, we can run on line 3 a FileMaker.perform script function, give it a name, and then pass in some data right below me there. This, again, is brilliant. This is show-stopping. It's game-changing. It's all the cliches that give us complete control. Now we can use a JavaScript function to cause a FileMaker script, in this case, receive data to run. That's pretty impressive, pretty great. So they've removed a lot of the roadblocks. The web viewer itself is still pretty great. They've done better with it. There are still some issues remaining here. There's going to be forever and ever probably an issue of when does the JavaScript load inside the web viewer so that it can be ready to use by FileMaker or vice versa. So there's still some timing issues about this web viewer object being loaded with the JavaScript code. It's not perfect, but it's getting close. And there are people out there that have great techniques and great solutions to dealing with some of the quirks of the web viewer. I wouldn't call them roadblocks so much. I would simply call them quirks of this object. But in all the work that I've done now, well, these last 2 years with FileMaker 19, I haven't really had many problems with this object itself. I've kind of have mastered it, and it can handle its little quirks here and there. So there's something to be said for that, but it's not a stoppable force for us. It is another tool. We realize that. I realize that as a big proponent of this. It is using JavaScript in FileMaker is another tool. The web viewer is just another object like a portal or a list view or a button bar or whatever. It's just another tool, but it's a powerful tool. And there are a ton of, to use the cliche, there's a ton of nails out there that can be used with JavaScript, can be handled with JavaScript. In my time so far in the community and now on my own and working with people to teach them JavaScript, we look at a couple different libraries in our time and we see what it can do. So right here, this is a very powerful nail, if that's what we're going to call it. It's a very powerful nail that I can use the connection between JavaScript and FileMaker, the connection between what's in the web viewer and the script, the bidirectional communication, and I can make pretty amazing things happen. I can click on a bar to show the data. I can use the buttons to load or to change the data. So if I click there, I get a FileMaker script, and then I can update the data using a FileMaker script to pass in new data to the chart. This is pretty powerful, and it's actually very doable. This is not beyond any of our scopes, our abilities. Another typical one is working with data tables, a data table. And what brings this to the forefront of the tools that we should use is that this list view right here has a ton of features already built in that we as FileMaker developers using a FileMaker list view or a portal would have to spend hours working on. The search here, this global search, the column sorting, the fact that all of these cells of data are just strings. They're just strings or numbers or dates or whatever. There's no calculations involved at all. I didn't mention this, I didn't put this as a slide, but all of this data here is gathered using the execute data API script step. That's another script step that they added in FileMaker 19 to solve a lot of the problems of getting data into the web viewer. And not so much getting it in there, but how to have it formatted for, in this case, a data table library. But this right here is powerful, and we should be able to look at it and go, okay, I can see in this case, there's 206 records, and the video is just flying through all of the records, showing any number of them at a time and filtering them in real time. The other data there's 8,700 records, and it took it's 9,700 records, and it took just a half a second to load, but now all of that data is in there. So if performance and speed for the user is important, is what you value, it seems like it's a no-brainer. I know that, there's still some brains that have to be involved in learning how to work with this, but that is completely accessible. So JavaScript is well supported. I don't think I have an image of this, but there are just, you type in JavaScript in a browser and your browser explodes with resources. Stack Overflow, thousands of questions are asked every day about working with JavaScript. And of course, we are building up a great community here in the Claris FileMaker space. All of the people who have spent a lot of time playing with that web viewer and playing with JavaScript in various ways, they're building up stuff that works for us FileMaker developers. That's what's pretty awesome about our community, is that we know that we are FileMaker developers and we need to work with JavaScript. So people are showing how that can be done. But again, Stack Overflow or any other site is a great place to find answers and help in working with JavaScript. We have a community that can help us work with JavaScript and FileMaker. And another benefit or reason why is just that we have FileMaker knowledge and we can use that knowledge. In the JavaScript world, there's a ton of ideas, there's a ton of techniques and concepts and little gotcha kind of things that we need to think about. There's a lot of stuff, and I just put a bunch of stuff, just some examples up here. Luckily, you and me, we are FileMaker developers. We have an extensive amount of knowledge of FileMaker in our head. We know techniques, we know the functions, we know how to do this or that. We know all of this stuff. So we can use our FileMaker knowledge to help us to understand the basic idea of JavaScript and how it will work too. If we're writing a variable, yes, we need to know how JavaScript writes variables, but we have that knowledge. We know what a script is, and we know that all of the local variables inside of a script have local context or local, they're only available inside of that script. And we know what global variables are and so forth. We know how to write a script, so we can apply some of that knowledge to writing a function. So we're not coming at JavaScript with a blank slate, you and I. We are coming at it with a ton of knowledge that will help us. Yes, there's some things that FileMaker does that JavaScript doesn't, like JavaScript is case sensitive, and it's pretty inconsistent in FileMaker about what's case sensitive or not. None of the functions are case sensitive. Some of the parameters might be. Variables are not case sensitive. JavaScript, everything is case sensitive. So that is some things that we have to deal with, but we can use our knowledge. And, I guess this is kind of a silly reason, but it's worth exploring. People who have been in the FileMaker world for 20 plus years could sit down and say, I'm done learning. But there's a lot of folks out there who don't have that opinion. I'm doing trainings right now in JavaScript for FileMaker developers. And I recently finished with a group of 3 or 4 people who had all been in JavaScript longer than in FileMaker longer than I've been around in this platform, 20 plus years. And they all said, I want to learn something new. And also they were saying, I don't want to miss out on this part of the FileMaker platform. So, that's maybe a good reason as any. All right, let's see if people have any questions. If you have a question, please type it in there. Otherwise, I'll keep on going. I like preaching to the choir, but I'm also interested in, chatting with people who have thoughts about this as well. All right, we'll come back to that in a bit. All right, so I want to just give a brief overview of what to learn. So it's my opinion, as one who has gone through a lot of learning of JavaScript, that we as FileMaker developers do not need to know the entire language of JavaScript. We can instead, let's see here. Yeah, okay. Actually, before we do that, why don't we go here and take that survey. and we'll see what you have to say there. I think this is the right one. Yeah. Just 3 quick questions. See what you have to say. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. I clicked on Beverly's link. All right, let's see what people have to say. So most of us learn just what we need to know. I feel like for efficiency, that's what is important. All right. Great. All right, very good. Thank you for that. Continue to put your answers in, and I'll keep on going here. Cool. So get back to what I was saying. What to learn as a person who started in FileMaker, who built a student information system, and then moved into consulting with Soliant, and then Geist Interactive. I had no previous experience. I think I learned ActionScript a long time ago, 3.0, to build some web game for my classroom, but didn't really know anything about it. And so I've as a FileMaker developer, I was stumbling around trying to learn JavaScript. What I would recommend that a very busy person that needs to solve a particular problem, what I would recommend people take a look at first are working with JavaScript libraries. Pre-packages or packages of code that will do a particular task, that will do something, that will render something or perform something in an efficient way. JavaScript libraries are amazing. And that's what I first started working with back at Soliant Consulting. I built that web viewer integrations library to try to figure out a nice way an organized way to put all the JavaScript and CSS and HTML code and such. I didn't know what I was doing, but the more I played with it, the more I understood the basic ideas. And during the times that I teach people, work with them, I don't start with variables and functions. I start with JavaScript libraries because we, as FileMaker developers, we need to build a list view that performs fast. We need to build the column sorting or the filtering. We need to build a web viewer, a chart that will allow people to hover and change data and pick the colors and the styling that I want. So a JavaScript library is the way to do that. All of JavaScript libraries, and this is what I teach with people and help them understand, JavaScript libraries are built around the same concepts no matter what they do. And I'll just give you a brief overview. A JavaScript library is basically, it's a package of code that we can either import into our project or we can link to at a content delivery network, a CDN, some URL somewhere. And once we have that imported or access or linked to, we can access a library and all of the methods, all of the functionality that the author has put in there. So this is an example of a very small one that actually it's actually complete. This small piece of code will take some columns, take some data that I bring from FileMaker, and it will render that list view that we saw a bit ago. Up here, I am starting by taking, I'm putting into a variable there using the const keyword, the place inside of my HTML where I want the data, where I want the table to go. And that's what this functionality is right here. It's looking for an element in the HTML that has an ID of dtable right there, and that's where it will put the table. Once I have that element inside of a variable there, I can then run and access and then run a function that is part of the library. The author of the data tables library, for example, wrote a function called data table dot capital D, capital T. They have a function there and we can just access it. We don't have to know anything about how it works. We just know that it will do what we want it to do. So we have this function there, and then inside of the function, inside of the curly brackets, this yellow here is a simple object that holds properties or options about the library. So in this case, the library says, you can give me a page length option, give me a number, and that's exactly how many rows I will render when you first load it. You could probably change it. In fact, that's by default. You can change them, but that is what I could put in there. The next option, column reorder. Call reorder is an option, and I set it up to true. So someone could literally drag a column and put it into a new spot on the view. And then of course I've got some columns and data, but this is all it is. It's just a function there in green that takes this object here, and then the library renders that beautiful table very easily. Pretty simple, pretty simple. Take a look at the next question in the, take a look at the next question and see what you have to say. Nope, that one, there we go. Does that library that you just saw, does this functionality, does it seem decipherable to you? Could you pick it apart and understand what to do with it? You probably will make mistakes and have errors. Those commas are a FileMaker developer's worst nightmare because we don't construct JavaScript like this or JSON like this. In FileMaker, we construct it using the JSON set element. We could do this manually, of course, but you're doing this manually in JavaScript for now, and that's an error. But yeah, most of us say, yeah, of course, it's decipherable. Legitimately, there are a couple people, 2 people here that it's not decipherable yet, but I think with some study, and especially if I color coded it here, it'll eventually become, yeah, I can figure this out. That's how I went through this, and I'm just a FileMaker developer. It took some study and realizing what was happening. All right, so that library, like I said, creates all of this. The same library you just saw, or the same functionality will create this. And you can see right above me, I've got 2 buttons there. Each button is passing in different data. So that's why I had that variable called columns and a variable called data, because that stuff is coming from FileMaker and it's telling my JavaScript, hey, when I press this, just load this column, these columns, and this data set. I'm using one web viewer here to load 2 different sets of data. All right, so that is working with a library. And this data tables one, for example, again, I do this in my teaching. I work with people on this. This library itself has a ton of options. I've been working with this probably for 5 years on and off. I've built probably 100 data tables, and I'm still discovering what more I can do with this, because all of these options are available for me to work with. It just keeps on going and going and going here. And I think that's, as a FileMaker developer, we think about the use cases that we need, and then we decide, we look in here and we see what the options are. Here's that length menu option. I can tell the data table what numbers to put in that little drop down that changed how many rows were rendered in a page. So this seems decipherable, and I think we can get there. I also would recommend that people learn some basic JavaScript syntax. While we as FileMaker developers will probably spend 80% of our time working with JavaScript libraries, it's always helpful to know the syntax in which you are, of the language you're working in. So you can take a look at that. In my training course, in what I work with people to do in my office hours and in the JSNFM community, I work with them to help them see that this piece of code right above me, right above my head there, will take an array of 100 records with a company name on it, and inside of a web viewer will render 100 buttons, one button for each data set of data, for each element in the array. Yeah, it needs some styling, needs some work, but there's about 8-10 lines there that generated one button per record in the data set. And of course, we've got it flowing across, in columns, and we can add spacing and colors and all sorts of stuff. So this right here is looking. I just look right above me and just kind of read it line by line if you've not looked at this much before, and just realize this is English. I can understand what it's saying. I may not exactly know, and if I try to type it, I'm probably going to make a mistake, but this is the syntax that will write 100 buttons, or one button per data set, right in the records. All right, 100, each of the records in the data set. All right, so let's keep on going. How to learn. So I'm going to take a few moments to talk about learning JavaScript, spending some time on that. Yes, you could go to your browser and search JavaScript courses. And I just did that, and I found a course. I found a list along with all the ads. But this gives me a list of great courses to either download, to purchase, to do whatever. And they will teach you great things about JavaScript. They certainly will. I've taken the course that Wes Boss teaches. I've taken the syntax, I forget the name, syntax course. I've taken a lot of courses in working with JavaScript and learning JavaScript, and you could certainly do that. But it's my thought, it's my opinion as one, again, who has gone through this, that we as FileMaker developers could pick out parts of JavaScript that will help us be successful right away. That button, the creation of the buttons here, there's a few concepts of JavaScript in there that if we learned it, we can do this 100 times. We could do this with any data set. We don't need to learn the entire course of JavaScript in order to create these buttons. So what I have put together in many iterations is a learning path that describes how, or what I think what I would recommend a FileMaker developer learn in JavaScript. They could take something like this. They could take these ideas and go, all right, I'm going to learn about functions. I'm going to learn about calling functions and parameters. I'm going to learn about how to manipulate data there. Sorry, the resolution on that's bad. I'm going to take this learning path and I'm going to go buy Wes Boss's course, and I'm going to take all of the lessons that teach me these things to help me be successful in creating a list view for a client, or creating buttons for a data set, for sure. And that's perfectly fine. But like I've said before, there are people in this community that, including myself, that have spent a lot of time, trying to help people learn JavaScript, and they've put together different courses or different demonstrations or whatever. My first exposure to actually learning JavaScript was Mike Duncan at Slant Consulting. he helped me, with some of his blog posts. He helped me to kind of start to decipher what JavaScript is about. I have part of my sole reason for existence, in at least for my business, is that I want to develop a community of people in the FileMaker space or the Claris Pro space, whatever. I don't know how I'm going to change this. That just talks about JavaScript. We don't talk about primary keys. We don't talk about anything else. We just talk about JavaScript that pertains to us in FileMaker. So I encourage you to be a part of it. This isn't necessarily an ad. It's just a free space that people can go and learn. I do office hours every Wednesday mornings. There's 2 times on Wednesdays that I do some office hours where I just go over JavaScript that I've been playing with. So part of that is great. But this, if you're pressed for time, if you have a lot of other things to learn, but you need something that is in the JavaScript space, that tool is going to help you. These are the ways that I would go about learning. And there's just a ton of resources out there to help us with this. All right, let's see if people have questions. I actually only see one question that pertains to the software I'm using. I will answer that at the end. Yeah, thanks, Jason. You picked up an answer. That's great. Okay. So the last thing I want to just share and talk about, I talk about this in my sleep sometimes, is something that I've termed the JavaScript development environment. It breaks down, in my opinion, the last barriers to working with JavaScript in FileMaker. Yes, we need to know what to learn. Yes, the web viewer is a little quirky at times. Yes, it might take some time to learn, but this environment that I'm using in my trainings, in my office hours, in the community there, is one of it. It removes the last things. Here are the last 3 things that I think are can be stumbling blocks for us. Number 1, how do we develop JavaScript for the FileMaker web viewer that we're working with? This development environment is set up so that I can use a code editor like VS Code here, and I can connect it to a sample file that's got a web viewer with a couple scripts and a couple buttons that allows me to do the majority of my development here. I'm using sample data, I'm not using real stuff, but I could actually take this environment and connect it to my real life app, my client app, using client data right away. In fact, that's what I do. I start with this environment, get it basically set up, and then I transition it to working with a client file, connecting it to my client file. But this environment is set up so that I can develop in the VS Code and see exactly what's happening, including the bugs in there. I have this web viewer over here that's got nice color coding. It's got it tells me when I'm making mistakes in my code. Just like the MBS plugin, this VS Code will tell me when I write a variable, but I don't actually use it anywhere. And since JavaScript is case sensitive, it actually can say, you declared a variable columns with a lowercase c, but you just wrote it here with a uppercase C. Which one is the right one? It'll actually prompt you to fix case sensitive errors, case errors, I guess. So that is developing. And then the rendering is next, being able to see whatever I'm actively typing in VS Code, see how it updates over in the web viewer right away or with a button click. And then deploying, the deploying idea is the last one here. When I'm done with this JavaScript, how do I take all this JavaScript and I push it into my client file so that it's ready to be used by all of the users in that business, with that app. So this development environment handles all of that. And I can, I want to be respectful of time, and Doug, you can let me know what to do, but I'm kind of I'm playing this video over my head here, but I could walk through this entire process and show this from start to finish. But that's what this environment is about, is to be able to help me to write code as efficiently as possible with JavaScript. I've written a lot about this. I wrote it at Proofgeist, but I'm writing about it now. I've got a website, JSNFM, where we talk about the learning path and also this development environment, so that people could walk through and see how to set this up and then how to start using it. And with my training folks, I asked them to go through this, and then once we start the training, we're using this every time to do our work.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Super interesting. And I think you really did a good job of pitching things just right for the audience, and really truly giving an introduction. And fantastic job. I'm sure that people have questions. One thing I'd like to ask, and it's maybe this is a question that you need to answer once you become more advanced, but it's, how do you decide when you should bring JavaScript in versus spending that little extra bit of time and just building it in FileMaker? Are there rules of thumb? Are there things that you apply that help you to decide? Because as you said earlier, when you've got a hammer, how do you make that decision?
I'll tell you mine, and then other people can say what their criteria is. I guess for me, my criteria is, do my clients need something that performs very quickly? Do they want interactivity with it? And is there something in the JavaScript space that already has this problem solved? And more so, like that data tables. If my client spends 3 hours telling me that their list view and every portal needs to have column sorting, needs to have the filtering, and that portal is going to pull data from 10 different sources, from 10 different child tables, or 7 hops away, that's definitely a case for JavaScript. I don't think the client cares so much about me using a portal or a web viewer with a library in it. Rather, they would rather have the problem solved and be able to do a search, a type ahead filter right away. So I guess for me, because it's just a tool in FileMaker, does this tool fit the solution the best? And since I know JavaScript, I know FileMaker, I could do either. I could solve any of these and both of these in both places. I think I'm going to pick JavaScript over FileMaker in certain circumstances. What do you think? Anybody else? Jason or Charles?
Sure, I got opinions.
Please.
I think, just to kind of reiterate a little bit of what Jeremy was saying, think about, when do you use FileMaker over Excel? And it's the same case, right? FileMaker can do so much more than Excel, but you can do some things in Excel. And JavaScript can do the same thing, but if you don't know how to use FileMaker, you wouldn't choose it over Excel. So the more you learn from JavaScript, you just expanded your tool set that much further, and you'll clearly be able to make that decision. If you don't currently know when to use it, it's probably because you don't have enough knowledge, and it's a good opportunity to expand that knowledge in that area so that you have that tool, so that you know that, okay, this is a square Robertson screwdriver or screw head. That's the one I need to use now.
Cool. Anybody else?
Hey, I'll jump in and say data tables is great. Jeremy, I first heard it mentioned by you. I used it on the website for script steps, functions, and script triggers as a way to make it easy for me and others perhaps to remember. I'm looking for something and, maybe it has the word host in it. So it's beautiful for that. Is there any reason that you can think of why more people, I don't want to name anyone in particular, more people and or organizations don't use it? Is there any security risks in using it?
No, I can't think of anything other than just feeling like people can't get to it. Yeah, I would use it everywhere. I would replace, and I was working with a client replacing 5 filtered portals on 5 tabs. If you listen to my podcast, you hear this story, same story, with one web viewer that can load 5 different sets of data. Actually, I think it's 5 or 6 or 7. I don't see any. I would, you talk about when would I use this? This is always going to be my solution. Just like for some folks, a virtual list is always their solution. I don't know, maybe people don't have an always solution, but I think I've arrived at a data table is much easier to implement and work with because of the functionality that they need.
And Jeremy, I would add to that, just another use case which hit the sweet spot for me, which is with the script steps, functions, and script triggers. That was code gen. So as the web page is vanilla. It's code gen. So the JavaScript skills and the use of these tools and can expand your scope within the FileMaker platform and also in website functionality that's complementary and useful in general.
I think I'll finish off this by saying I will always use data tables. I will always use a chart library to solve the use cases that my client brings where those are relevant.
Yeah, charts and calendars. Yeah, so many. And your library that you put together years ago was pretty amazing. Anyway, good stuff. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jeremy, did you say you have a new podcast? Or is that,
I do. Chris Hippolyte and I are doing one called In the FileMaker Lab. We just released our 4th episode, which had Andy Lacates and Peter on there as well. But it's really just hey, what are you working on, Charles? Why don't you share that in our podcast and let's just hear about what you're working on rather than what are you an expert on?
Right.
I want to hear what you're working on. So, in the FileMaker Lab.
Can you drop a link to that, or?
I can, and I'm also going to start. I'm starting up one on just JavaScript and FileMaker. I am going to go to my grave only talking about. If I never talk about what primary key to use, I will be happy because I will just focus my breath on JavaScript and FileMaker. So start a podcast on that coming up soon too. Yeah, I mean, Doug, what other thoughts do you have?
Well, what normally happens is it takes a minute or two for people to loosen up and not be afraid to jump in and ask a question. We've got a lot of people in here still, and so I'm sure that there are people that have things that they're wondering, things that they want to, maybe they're like, who is thinking about moving more into the JavaScript space and learning more and exploring. Go down to the bottom and put a little click on the reaction button and give a thumbs up or
wasn't there a survey on this yet?
Yeah.
I have a question if I could ask.
Please.
I would love to see a very simple demo of JavaScript used in charting, in dynamic charting that you were referring to. I don't know if you can pull it off now, but maybe point to somewhere on your website or throw it up at some point for us.
I mean, yep, I will fire it up right now. Who else? Who else?
I
got a
already
question?
posted a link to your JS and FileMaker.
Great. I'll show you the example that I did in the video there, but if you don't mind, I'll reshare my screen and show you what I've got. I'm always ready. I've got hundreds of examples on my machine, so I can show. So this is our podcast, by the way, in the FileMaker lab. So check that out. And please, I would love to have some of you on and be part of that. All right, so here is the code that runs the JavaScript. I don't know what. Here's a function called Apex Charts, and I'm just telling it what my options are. Over here in FileMaker, I've got this. Excuse me. It's a very simple example, but it's pulling data from FileMaker. The data is coming from this script right here, where it's just hard coded data. But if I change this to 330, then if I load it, that data comes in here, and then I can hit this button right here that updates the data, that passes new data into the chart. Notice there wasn't any flashing, and it had a little nice animation. That's just a quick example of using a chart. Using a charting library to do this, and I have complete control over this. Any of the colors I want to change, I can change. Load that. So now it's a different color. I think I can change how it curves. Does that work? Nope, it's not that one. I have to remember what it is. Yeah, I could change the type, so I could make it a bar instead, just hard code bar. Right now, the type is coming in from FileMaker, but I can change that. So there you go. That's an example of dynamic charting.
Mm-hmm. And so what about how the end user would interact with that as opposed to getting into the code to make changes?
Great question. You, as a FileMaker developer, would lead them in that way. You could, and I might see if I can have an image of this, but you can set up, use your file. So, okay, so let me just show you the basic script. The basic script is, I've got a variable with the word line in it, a variable called type with the word line in it, and I'm getting some data from this script, passing it back to the main script. This is just hard-coded data to save time in development, but you, FileMaker developer extraordinaire, can write a function here, write a script that will go get the right data that they need. If there's a checkbox on here that says go get company's data, then your script will do that. As an example, that data tables thing that I showed, I think, oh no, it's not this one. The data table is one that I showed. It had two different scripts. Here it is, it's this one. It has two different scripts. Well, actually, it has, sorry, it has one script that, depending on the column type that the person passes in via the buttons, it constructs a query. And the query is using the execute data API. It's just saying, hey, go to this layout or another layout. So I'm using my FileMaker skills to grab different data sets based on what the person is asking for. So that's how I would do it. I would expose what I want to expose as a JavaScript developer. I would expose, if I wanted them to change the type of chart, I would give them a little checkbox button right here that says line or bar and let them choose what to do. Same for the data.
Okay.
Cool. How do you overcome the printing issues that arise?
Good question. In some cases, one can't. It's becoming rarer and rarer, if that's the word. Okay, so like this is an Apex chart. This is, I've actually worked out how to grab this as a PNG, send it back to FileMaker, put it onto a layout, and then print it out there. So that's one way. Charting, people like to print layout, print those. Maybe a data tables, it's not so much interesting to print, but they may want to export this data. And so I would just tell FileMaker, hey, here's the data that the JavaScript has. Go ahead and export it the way you know how to export it. So there are ways to get around it. And most, a chart is probably that one. And if someone said, hey, Jeremy, I want you to build me a chart that I can print, I would use this particular library because it has built-in functionality to allow it to be printed. There are other JavaScript libraries, charting libraries, that don't, or that I haven't worked out exactly how it's done yet. So.
Hey, let me jump in. Doug asked a question a little bit complicated. I wasn't going to bring it up, but getting something out of the web viewer. Jeremy, you said you pick up a PNG, like if the web viewer generates a PNG, you grab it. We did it with a barcode implementation with JS barcode. Grab the PNG and put it into a container field, and then you're kind of on FileMaker territory, and you can print that real easy. It did break somewhere between FileMaker 18 and 19. I'm still trying to pin it down. There's something interesting that happened. Blog post Swim did, Reliant, where they FileMaker swapped out the underlying engine on the Windows platform to the Edge browser, if I'm reading that right.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, do you think that's going to break any of the JavaScript code in implementations out there? They went from what, Edge to Chromium or something? I'm trying to read it here.
No, I mean, that's one of the barriers that Claris removed, is by getting rid of Internet Explorer. And I put that in there and then I deleted that slide. Internet Explorer is what Windows used, and its underlying web viewer. The underlying browser was the Internet Explorer, and that's deprecated. It's no longer supported, so they had to remove it. In fact, what you ask, it'll help people out.
More good news, all good news.
Yeah.
Yeah, FileMaker 19.3.1, web viewer engine from IE to Edge.
So, yeah. Don't get me wrong, JavaScript is frustrating at times. I have to get up and walk away, but I mean, I do the same thing with FileMaker too. So it's not, it's not that extraordinary of a case. And, I think Doug, are you still here?
Yeah.
Douglas, who lives near me.
Another.
Yeah.
I think he left. No,
okay.
He's there.
He's there.
It's on the list.
People that I've worked with and spend time with are starting to feel, oh, I can get this done. I can do this. So it's not unreachable for any of us.
And I have a question about data tables.
Yes.
How would you handle editing data through data tables if a customer asks for that?
Good question. I would put a row click. I put an event on the row that allows someone to click on it or double click on it if I wanted to, open up a card window, go find that record that they clicked on and display it in FileMaker fields. Let them edit it, close the web viewer, and then reload the data, either completely fresh new data where it flashes and then it reloads, or I could update just that one row without destroying everything else.
Is there any way that we could manipulate data like directly on data tables?
Mm-hmm. They have a premium plugin that is an editor. It's called an editor, and it allows you to do inline editing. That's a good question. I don't actually see that use case too often in list views. But I don't know, maybe I just haven't used a list view in a long time if inline editing is part of the reason I don't like, and other people may have thoughts, but I'll just say that, with inline editing, you have record locking problems. You could run into issues. So I don't know how often it's used, but yes, it is possible to inline edit using a many list libraries, not just data tables.
I think a more common use case for editing within a list would be not really typing in fields, but toggling things.
Sure, yeah.
And I guess you could do that. I actually haven't used data tables, so I'm guessing you can just put some HTML in one of the columns, right? And then that would be all FileMaker.perform script.
Yeah, for sure. I could put a button in a cell in a column, and it could do whatever we need to do. Toggle on or off, disable that line, whatever I wanted to do. Yeah. I just built for a friend. I built a CSV or XLSX or XML conversion to JSON. So he puts one of those kinds of files into a container field. JavaScript handles it and converts it to JSON and pastes it back to a text field inside of FileMaker. So anyway, that's, I don't go wild and just build an entire, I don't use a web viewer to build all of the layouts for people. I will build widgets, and that's what my business is about. That's what I would recommend, is just use a FileMaker layout. But if it's a student detail record and you want to display all of that student's grades, and those grades are 3 hops away through their classes, table occurrence, through a year relationship, blah, blah, blah. You may just want to grab that data using the execute data API script step, push it into a web viewer that has data tables, and you can display that student's grades throughout all of the years in a small little widget that's tucked in the bottom left of the layout. So that's, I would love to talk. I love to talk JavaScript. I do have the office hours at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning Eastern time and 3 p.m. tomorrow. The community is a great place to get the conversation going. I have a YouTube channel, JavaScript and FileMaker. I'm really trying to stir the pot about this and just keep it in everybody's faces even more.
All right. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much. If anyone's got any more questions or anything like that, or wants to hang out for a while, then that's great. Normally people do hang out for a while. In fact, sometimes they get really crazy and hang out like long after I've gone to bed. So we don't know what might happen. But Jeremy, thank you again, and you're off the hook if you want to head out. But I'm sure if you want to hang around, people will hang around. What normally happens is it's like a high school dance where everyone stands around and looks at each other for a while, but then after a while, someone starts dancing, and before you know it, there are a whole bunch of people on the floor. So we'll see how things go tonight. Thanks again, Jeremy.
Yeah. Welcome.
Thanks, Jeremy. I just wanted to mention, this is not, this is more technical. That very interesting way you were presenting with the behind you. For some reason, as time went on, your visuals were out of sync more and more with your voice.
Were they?
Your face was much later than what we heard.
Okay.
For me, anyway. Did everyone else have that experience, or was it just me?
Yep.
Oh, you should have told me. Sorry.
It wasn't bothering me.
Did bother you? So I'm using. That's the hard thing about this, and I've just never been satisfied. This is the app that I use for demonstrations. It's called And it allows me to create slides down here and move my camera all around.
It was very interesting. I think it's great, but I just wondered why the out of sync thing happened.
It's because I'm sharing this app's like broadcast window, and it just gets out of sync with my mic, I guess. So next time I'll learn to do this. I'll do that.
Or could you restart the whole thing after every 20 minutes or something? Would that?
Well,
Maybe.
get that sync really fast.
I noticed it from the beginning, so I don't know if that would help.
Okay. Was it really distracting,
And
Charlie?
Jeremy-
Not really. I didn't find it distracting at all, to be honest with you. Not too bad.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, it was no distraction either, but perhaps, Jeremy, I think what you could do is you could get your microphones and put to be coming like from your screen as if being a video, and you could mute yourself and you would share both your screen and your computer's audio, you know.
Okay.
And I guess at that point, it would make everything in sync on the receiving end. But it's worth testing for, but that's all.
Yeah, good point.
Well, at any rate, thanks a lot for your hard work in the presentation. I think it was pretty good.
Yeah, classic kung fu movie.
I look forward to listening to the podcasts.
Who
A lot of
else?
work. A lot of work that goes into those, Jeremy. Seems like.
Oh yeah, so it's a lot of time.
Yeah.
We keep them short. My last podcast could have gone 90 minutes, but this one is like less than 40. We we don't linger too long with people.
But does that make post-production or anything any easier, or
A
really?
little bit. I mean, I edit all the stumblings that I say and that my guest says. So I edit those out. It just takes a long time. Yeah.
Like all the ums and ahs and that sort of thing? Yeah,
I
that's
try to.
time. Yeah.
Many as I can.
Everybody wants to start a podcast, right? So, but it's
Easy.
like, so much work. It seems like.
What would Tony White's podcast be called if he were to start one?
If I restarted it,
Best answers only.
Yeah.
Wrong answers
no, I
only.
have a great name, the FileMaker Fanatics podcast. I did 5 episodes. Each presentation was like 2 hours long, I think, and the post-production was like 10 hours.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It was crazy, although I had some nice tooling to get it done in the post-production.
Yeah, perhaps live events, you know, you can go by with that, but then you can't re-listen to it afterwards. So
The Eric Matthews, if he's still on the line, Dig FM does for the user groups, does some of the best post-production work in the FileMaker community. Hey, Eric, are you there? Or are you
Yeah,
out walking the dog?
no, I'm here.
I'm
I
excited.
just saw a piece of software today called Descript that's unbelievable. You just
Yeah.
load your video in or your audio, and it transcribes the entire thing. Hang on 1 second. Stop. Transcribes the whole thing, and then you can edit the ums. You can find all the ums and ahs and just delete them. You press a button and it cuts it
Wow.
all out. You can take paragraphs of
Wait,